This episode is packed with relevant insights. If you want to step into a leadership role or even your next leadership role, I have Darcy with me in this podcast. She's been an executive coach for 15 years and has had a very successful career before that. And she's sharing a lot of insights about what her executives bring into the coaching, what they struggle with, and how she helps them to stay resilient, to stay great in what they're doing and stay on track with what they actually want and how to implement that in their careers and lives. So stay tuned, stay until the end, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you like what you're getting here. Hi, welcome everybody to the Corporate Warriors podcast. My name is Fela Rosa, and in this special episode, I have Darcy Eikenberg with me. Darcy is a previous partner in a global professional services firm, and now over a decade, she's been coaching executives and teams successfully, and I'm really glad to have her here. Welcome, Darcy, to the podcast.
Oh, Bela, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Well, amazing. So you are the most experienced coach that I've ever had the pleasure to have in the podcast. I'm really looking forward to getting some good insights out of you and share with the community. So would you just start off with introducing yourself again from your personal point of view and just add whatever you feel, is relevant for you and your work?
Sure. Well, it's a very generous opportunity. I have actually had my business now as a coach for 15 years, I believe. You lose count after a while, although every few years you're learning something new and you're trying new things. So it always feels like I'm just starting. The world is changing so fast, and our world of leadership and teams is changing. And so we're always in learning mode. But yes, as you mentioned, the majority of my career prior to this was as a principal in a large professional services firm, where I worked with teams and clients all over the world. And like many people, one day I had new jobs and promotions every 2 or 3 years. And then one day I looked around and said, what's next for me? And the next thing wasn't that obvious. And that's when I actually hired my first coach. And at the time, doing the math, this is a while ago, coaching wasn't as prominent as is today. And so really hunting down somebody who's calling themselves a coach and not even knowing what that experience should be like or what that world was like. And I never had an intention to say, well, I want to do that. I want to be a coach. I thought I was a great corporate leader and I wanted to continue to do that. And then realized through some of the work that, that happens in coaching, to get clear about who I was and what I really wanted. And what I realized is that I was so much stronger and better when I was focused on helping people behind the scenes. I could do the stuff out in front of everybody, but I really loved it when I could work with a team and have them get the win, as opposed to me being the one up front getting the win. And so that led me to take coaching courses and really understand that coaching is a profession and has certain competencies. Led me to getting my credentialing through the International Coaching Federation, and being able to build a business that I work in every day and love still today.
Wow, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Well, it's so interesting that you say, 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't as normal to have coaches. I think in all areas right now, I think it's super normal to have sports coaches. For some reason in the fitness area and the fitness realm, it's become super normal, like where in the past only celebrities would have their fitness coach or something. Now private people have that too. And I guess for career coaching, it's the same. I've read a book once of Dr. Louise Frankel, which I adore. She got me into the whole topic basically. And she said that back in the days when she was a coach, a career coach, she was brought in to basically help professionals that weren't really, in the path that they should be on. So it was more felt like it's a punishment in some sort. So the mindset has really shifted a lot. So do you see a difference in terms of when you think back at the coach that you had 15 years ago, how coaching was perceived? Did you tell anybody that you had a career coach, or was it more like a secret?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, I didn't tell anybody until I was in the process and I realized what I was learning. And then I wanted to tell everybody, right? But you raise is really interesting because as a coach, even less today, but there are still some corners of the world today, especially in certain businesses or certain mindsets, where you say you're a coach, and the question is, well, what sport? And the ironic part is that my sister was a U.S. Division I college women's basketball coach for 20 years. So we would, be at family events, and someone would say, "Oh, you're the coach," and it'd be like, "Well, which one do you mean?" So, um, but I think that one of the things that is happening right now is there is a recognition that we all need support in some way. And I don't care if you call it coaching, or there are specific parts that coaching is different from consulting, which is different from counseling and different from therapy. But in many ways, the fact that people are feeling comfortable saying, hey, there are things that are bigger and broader than I can handle on my own. So reaching out for outside help, I think there is less, to the point of, you said, telling people about it, shame, embarrassment, and also a sense of pride that, someone has the confidence or the strength enough to say, hey, you know what, I don't have to hold everything by myself. I actually can have a trusted advisor in these areas. And whether that's career, whether that's specific areas of life. My focus tends to be in the career, the high-end leadership team space. But, there are a lot of professional coaches who have deep disciplines in many other areas of our life. That how can we be an expert if we're doing something for the first time, or we're trying to grow in a way that we haven't experienced that before? Sometimes we need an outside guide.
Yeah, and I think it's also very powerful to have like a neutral instance as this guide, because first thing we all do, I think, is go to family and friends, and it's good, it's helpful to some extent, but it's a very different feeling, it's a very different approach. Obviously, once you have had a first real coaching session, I think that's when it makes click in most of people's minds. And you could figure out things on your own as well and read books and do things, but it just takes so much time. So I think it's always also a little bit of a shortcut, because you directly go into the root of the problem instead of like searching what is really behind it for 5 years until you finally figured it out, right?
Well, and it is interesting, in the coaching that I do, and sort of the the label of a coach, especially through organizations like the International Coaching Federation, is that coaching is focused on understanding where you are now and where you move forward. Less about sort of the why you got there, what you got there. Those are circumstances. And sometimes there are reasons why in therapy, in professional therapy, we need to understand some of those motivations. But they can be different interventions. I also think that sometimes people will work with a coach and it will seem obvious, and then they'll kick themselves. They'll be like, well, why couldn't I figure that out? And the reason actually is how the brain works. One of the things that I always share with my clients is the old phrase, you can't see the label from inside the jar. The brain is always structured biologically to keep us safe and to keep us kind of intact. So seeing new possibilities, seeing the things where maybe we're getting in the way of ourselves, we often have this competing part of our brain. The author Seth Godin refers to it as the lizard brain, but it is that part in the amygdala that literally biologically is telling you, don't go there, don't try that, stay small, stay safe. And it comes from our prehistoric background of just wanting to survive. And so this is why sometimes people say, well, who's your biggest competition? I always say my biggest competition for coaching clients and teams is often the potential client themselves. Because when you work with smart people who they know something's not right, but they say to themselves, I should be able to figure that out. Or maybe after the kids get back in school, or after we get through the Christmas holidays, I should be able to figure that out. Or I need just to take a weekend away, but we never do. And that's the value of having a coach, and the commitment of time, but also a trained professional to kind of unpack some of that excuse making, and again, your biological brain just trying to keep you safe and really pull things out, but in a safe and understanding, empathetic way that says, great. So if that's the situation, you're feeling you're struggling in your job, like, then let's figure out the actions. What do we want to do about it?
So that is also the reason why most of the executives reach out to you, that they're, let's say they're in some way struggling, but obviously no executive would ever admit that openly, right? So it's like you need this kind of confidential room where you can really be fully transparent with somebody that you can trust, that you know, has the expertise, but also has, all of the confidentiality that's to it. What you just said is like, for instance, speaking up is dangerous, right? In our brain, so to speak, but if you're already an executive, obviously you have spoken up in the past, right? So you already have those reference stories that could support you in just continuing that. So why do executives reach out to you most of the time, let's say?
Usually the reason that someone will reach out to someone like me isn't always the reason about what the problem is that needs to be solved. But usually there is what I often call a catalyst moment. Had a key employee leave and it's causing pain or problems. Had as a health scare and realize they can't keep working the way that they're working, or have a new team taken on a new job, a new opportunity. And so there are new pressures and saying, how do I support myself in wanting to succeed in this new opportunity? But there's usually always a catalyst. And the issues that we might tackle and work on may have been happening for a long time, but usually there's something that brings it to a surface where someone will take an action to go out and say, okay, I'm ready to think about help. They may not actually engage at that point, but it's just the first part of the thought of, wait a minute, I don't think I want to handle this on my own anymore. I think there should be some better solutions. So it can be all over the board. Right now, I'm seeing more of a pattern in overwhelm and sort of pre-burnout, balancing pressures, and especially, pressures of our demands at the office, but also demands at home. And I'm also seeing this, it used to be much more prevalent in women. I'm also seeing this emerge more in men too, who want to have more of a presence as their children are growing up, or as their parents are aging, or have more of the pressures of handling that. Again, it's certainly not balanced by any means. Women still can't carry a heavier load of many of those things, but those issues are adding to stress. And then add in all the noise from the environment. Oh, I should be doing that. I should be getting up at 5 a.m. and I should be meditating half an hour a day. A good coach can help you pull out what's real for you versus all the noise about all the things that especially smart, hardworking, ambitious people kind of feel like they have all the shiny shoulds. Oh, I should be doing all that. So I'm not, so I must be a failure. No, that's not true.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's so important. And this is actually what I feel is happening on all levels at this point. I think it's a lot also due to social media. In a good and a negative sense, both comes always together. So, also the young people, they learn about these things, those books like, 5 a.m. Club, what you just mentioned. They can be great tools, but what I feel what's happening very often is that you have a routine, great, right? Everybody needs routines. The human brain needs routines. But then we learn so many different things that could be advantages. So you get up, you need to drink 24 ounces of water with lemon, and then you need to do your sports, and then you need to do the journaling, and then you need to do this. And every time you learn something new, you just add it to the list. So even before you're already in the workplace, you already had a to-do list of like 20 things, and then the positive effects of the routine can become a negative effect because you're completely overwhelming yourself and think, well, if I don't drink that much water, then my brain is not hydrated. And of course I cannot do that, right? And it's like just adding up. And at some point it's becoming a contrast. Like I need to get up at 5, but I have to sleep at least that many hours. And in the evening, I need to spend some time with my wife or with my husband, because otherwise, I don't have any date nights or whatnot. Like, and then at some point it becomes just impossible, so you get a burnout before even going to work, basically.
It is impossible. So in my latest book, it's called Red Cape Rescue: Save Your Career Without Leaving Your Job. One of the chapters that's become very popular with people and with my speaking audiences is a chapter called Drop Some Balls. And the truth is that our decisions and the decisions of a lot of the folks that I have the opportunity to work with are not about what to do. They're about what not to do.
Yes.
And to me, that is the discipline that all of us need to learn, because there are always going to be good ideas out there, and there's always going to be new ideas. That's just the nature of our interconnected world. And, thank goodness for our internet and our, smartphones and all the ways that we can stay connected with our loved ones and people we've never even imagined all over the world. And we have to know that we have control over what we think, what we do, and what we say. We don't have to let all that control us and create anxiety, create guilt, create shame. We have to know it's like, hey, that's cool that you're going to do the 5 a.m. boot camp, for 6 months, or the hard 70, or, any of the trendy things. It's not for me, or it's not for me right now. But
exactly.
Thanks, you go. And this is knowing how to drop balls, even things you might be in the middle of, and at work especially too, to recognize when your plate, your portfolio is just too much. Sometimes we don't know until we're in it. And I was just talking to a client the other day who is, after sort of a slower summer, is approaching that, and was kind of, trying to talk himself into, well, but it's going to be okay. And well, I've handled that before. And I reminded him that burnout, overwhelm, it's not a roller coaster, whereas it comes up and then it comes down, gradually. It goes up and then it drops. I mean, it is a hard drop. You have to know yourself of, on that upscale, where is that last 80% when you've got to make decisions and take control and back it back down. And sometimes that means having a hard conversation with somebody to say, I know I committed to this, and when I look at the priorities that I'm involved in, it's not going to happen the way that we thought. Let's brainstorm about other ways to do it. And, these are not easy conversations, but better than failing, than crashing and burning, than damaging your home relationships because you're working every weekend or working all night, or, or worse. Oh yeah, I'm with the family, but I'm, my face in my little box of chips. So these are things that a coaching relationship can help bring to the surface, so you can make more conscious decisions, as opposed to what our brain is designed to use as least calories as possible and be unconscious, which is easy to go unconscious on a lot of those things.
Yeah. Until the catalyst moment happens, right? So
the catalyst moment happens, and bam, then you're like, okay, wait a minute, wake up.
Yes, totally. And the truth also is, it would be great if people reached out before the catalyst moment happens, but we do all need the wake up call to some extent, I feel, because again, the brain is comfortable being where it is.
Well, and you mentioned, in the past, the word coaching had often been for remediation, like, he needs to be coached, right?
Yes.
Opposed to being a development or a future focused or a growth aspect, which is how most smart companies, smart executives use it now. And there are increasingly people who will say, hey, I just need a thought partner. Like, I just need a safe, confidential place where I can just talk through the things that are going on, strategize about who do I need to say what to and how, And, over time, I have clients who engage for that reason, that there's nothing that's wrong. It's just staying in tune with who they are, how
Yes.
they want to operate, and knowing that their professionally trained coach will always have their agenda at heart, the client's agenda, as opposed to, oh, you should do this or try this, or here's this new trend. And it's just kind of that calibration to stay on track.
Yeah, totally. And I do feel we're going more and more in that direction. So I have also more and more younger people reaching out where I think I would have never thought of that when I was your age, but it's a positive development also. At least obviously if you have a good coach, that's also always a thing, but it's the same with doctors. So we don't need to blame only the coaching area. I feel you always
Right.
need to be very conscious about also who you choose to work with in every regard, right? Who do
Yeah,
you
and I
trust?
think coaches have to be conscious of, especially, I've seen this more in a younger professional, of that it's not a buffer or a hook. Like, it's not oh, well, I have a coach, so I can not do the work, like
No.
I'm trying to use having a coach as an excuse of why I'm not willing to make a decision, or sort of elevating things that I want to build and learn for myself. So it's great to have support, and I can't do the work for somebody. I
Yeah.
can do it with somebody. And I think sometimes as coaching has magnified all over the world, people are like, well, then that's my solution. It's like, no, you're still going to be responsible
Oh, yeah.
for the results that you get. I'm sorry, I
Yes.
have no magic wand. What
Yeah.
I do have is the trained competencies, the experience to be able to hear what you're saying, to guide, to help you see, mirror back that behavior, so that you can create new possibilities for yourself.
Yes. Oh, I fully agree. That's what I also, in the very first session, make sure that I try to tell my clients that the main shift of the coaching happens in between the sessions. So the coaching session itself can give you, a new thought, can help you see something from a new perspective, but in between is where the implementation happens. And this is actually what's going to make a difference for you in your career or your life, right? Whatever it is that you needed coaching on. So, and this is, as you said, really important to keep that in mind. It's not like, oh, I pay somebody now, so my problem is gone.
Right. And there are, young people that I know work with, or younger professionals that work with, some colleagues of mine, that some of the trends that I've heard there is that folks think, well, if I get a coach, then I'll get confidence. But the truth is, as just you were saying, confidence comes from action. Now, hiring a coach or even reaching out and having a consultation might be an action that spurs you into more action, but we're waiting for this magic lightning bolt sometimes of like, oh, please give me confidence, or take away my worry. It's like, it happens through action, and imperfect action. It's like, the action doesn't have to be the right action, it just has to be action, and that's what creates confidence. It's what creates momentum. It's what shakes out anxiety and worry. It's the inaction and the kind of the feeling stuck and frozen that can really hurt us in the long run.
Yeah, fully agree. I think what would be really interesting for the audience, and it's just basically some coaching real talk. Okay, so we get serious. What about, let's say, a client comes in, they have exactly that problem. What works really well in the early career stages is like take on new projects, right? Take on some great shiny projects where you have some management exposure, right? All these things that help you really advance in the beginning to make yourself seen, stand out from the crowd, all of these nice things. And then at some point, you have taken on so many projects and you have advanced, right? You're perhaps team lead now, or even a little bit higher. And you come to the point where this strategy doesn't work anymore. You cannot just take on new projects, right? So you need to switch. You need to move to a new strategy, and potentially in some regards also, let's say, let your manager down because they only know you as a person taking on the project and sweeping behind the other folks that don't do their job in the way that was expected or whatnot. So once they have the coaching now and they learn, oh, okay, I cannot just take on more and more. I need to go into this discussion with my manager, say it's too much. We need to reprioritize or shift things around. Has it already happened that the manager was just not agreeing to that? That like in that company that came to an abrupt end, not necessarily firing, but just being like a glass ceiling that was built up because they were standing up for themselves, because they were setting the boundaries. Did that already happen? And how did you as a coach then react?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a couple things there. So one, I think it's important to recognize that the old phrase is what got you here won't get you there, right? The behaviors that we take on early in our career, the hey, put me in coach, hey, I'll do it, aren't always the behaviors that get us to the higher levels of leadership.
Yes.
And making that leap to leadership looks very different. It looks different when you become a manager than when you were the peer. Even though for you, you're like, I'm just the same person. Why are they treating me differently? Why are my expectations differently? So first of all, recognizing that there is a clear change. And sometimes that's a place where coaching can really help you identify what are the behaviors and assumptions that you were making when you were more of an individual contributor, or even more of a tactician, meaning like I'm told to do things and I just do it. I do it with excellence. But now you're being asked to be more of a strategist, to think not just what to do, but why we do it, and figure out how we do it. So making that leap can be really tricky. Sometimes our leaders don't necessarily even see that we're making that leap. And we get stuck in, I'm ready for more, I want more, but I'm still doing the tactical day-to-day work. Or we had a situation earlier this year where a person was told, well, we can't promote you to the leader role because who would do the work that you're doing? Which again is not a satisfying answer, nor is that a very smart answer on that manager's part, right? But my friend Sarah Mann and I actually co-wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review earlier this year about this, around I'm perceived less than what I know that I can contribute. I forget exactly what the specific title was, but so in those cases, like when we have these tough conversations around, here are the things that I'm doing, excuse me, and here are the things that need to drop or be renegotiated. We have to look at that list through the lens of how we want to be seen. And who do we want to be, and what are our superpowers? What are the things that we make the best and highest contribution? Because a lot of times, if we're good at our work, we make it look easy, right? We can execute the spreadsheets all day long, but now we've grown out of that work, but we're still doing it. And what I like to do with people as we go through kind of what that conversation should be like, and also making the choices about what you might drop or renegotiate or not say yes to when it comes around again, is recognizing what is the fit in your superpower space. Like, your company's paying you for a level of talent and contribution, and it's your responsibility. Make the most of that, right? Like, if you are being paid, if we just did the math and said, I'm paid $100 an hour, if I'm doing $20 an hour work or $40 an hour work, that's actually cheating the company. And so this is a thing a lot of people don't think about, because they think, well, all work is equal. It's not true. All work is not equal. And sometimes we'll go through an exercise to think about, if you were an external consultant and you were being paid, not on a salary level, but actually on either an hourly rate or a project level, how much of the work that you're doing is actually busy work, or work that if you looked at the bill and said, I don't want to pay such and such that money for that job, I can have somebody else do that job that is maybe simpler or a less experienced person can do. And it's not that all the work doesn't have value. It's just that we have to be conscious of it has different value. And if we want to increase our value at work, we've got to recognize, first of all, what our value is in a way that the company values. So not just like, oh, we think it's important that customer calls are answered in 30 seconds. Well, does the company measure that? Does the company care about that? We have to align what we know we're great at with what the company also values. And that's how we can get out of the trap of doing so many little things that we're not doing anything great, but being able to say, hey, my leader, hey, my manager, this piece is the most important thing to the company. And it's in my superpower space. And it's where if I focus more of my time here, then it's going to be better for all of us.
Yeah. Well, but did it already happen? I just need to I need to drill down on this one. Did it already happen that the manager, because they're not perfect either, just because they're higher up doesn't mean that they're excellent at their job. You don't know how they got there, right, in the first place.
Well, I think it's a great point. And didn't interrupt you, but it's a great point that sometimes we assume that our leadership or our managers have the answers or have more data, and it is rarely the case, which is why one of the things that I say that we all have to remember in our careers is that we only control three things: what we say, what we do, and what we think. We don't control what someone else does or what they know or what they can help us with. So recognizing like it's in my control to come to them and ask, or come to them and present a solution, and then to react from whatever they say. But first I've got to do my homework.
Yes. And again, oh God, I'm a pinta is what we used to call it. I don't know if you know what that stands for. I am a little pinta. So has it already happened to one single one of your clients that was setting up boundaries and basically figured out that setting a boundary in this corporation is not possible?
So it has happened to some of my clients. Also, the opposite has happened where people said, it will not be possible for me to take on a lesser workload. There is no way that anybody is going to agree to that. And then have been like shocked and surprised when their manager said, oh, yeah, it makes sense. Great. Let's give these things to Sandy and you keep doing these things. Sometimes we overstress about these things and we make up stories in our head about how important it is, when if we're just coming with a business case, we're just coming with a straw man or an ask, and no is always an acceptable answer. No just gives us what's the next rock to manage from. So to your point, there have been situations where people have said either the wrong things on their plate, or they're not growing because they're still stuck in maybe the more of the tactical work and less of the leader level work that they want. And after several conversations, find that no one cares or no one's listening. To me, that's then where you've done the homework to say, is what I want possible here? And if it's not, then it's like, great, then I can make a decision that it's time to go and search for what's next. The challenge that I think a lot of people have is that they don't do the interim. They don't have the conversation about what's not making them happy or what's overwhelming or frustrated. They don't even identify that. They just say, oh, I'm not happy at this job anymore. I just need to go find another job. And yet we saw this a lot during COVID, that people who went and found other jobs and could do that quickly had the same issues start to emerge, because what is in common was their mindset, their choices, how they decided to work.
Yeah, always looking for the common denominator is always a good strategy, right? If it's in personal relationships or in work relationships or whatever it is.
And again, recognizing that all I can control is what I say, what I do, and what I think. And I have more power over those things than I give myself credit for, especially what I think. Like I could think that my boss is a jerk, or I could think maybe my boss doesn't have the experience that I assumed he did, or maybe he's also scared of the upcoming layoffs, or that, she's overwhelmed too. And so she doesn't know how to help me. So, we have control over that. And so by having control over that, it helps us decide then, great, if only thing I control is me, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Where do I need to go next? And being able to recognize that sometimes if we've done the work to really look at, how are things that I could shift to be able to stay or to change my situation for the better, then it's like, I've done what I could. I have given it the old college try, as they say. And now let me turn my attentions elsewhere. And, doing it in a professional manner and, not leaving out of they're not treating me well. So, F them and move out the door. It's a learning process, because I think too, people underestimate that finding new opportunities that match who you want to be now can be hard. It's not a magic store. You can't just put it into Amazon and the perfect job just pops up, for you on your plate in 2 days. So we get frustrated. And what I see people doing is that they get frustrated in their current job. They're not doing the work to say, what's in my control to change? Then they go out and look for new jobs, and that's hard too.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, I guess I just am stuck where I am. And no one wants to feel stuck.
Yeah. And then for this short period of time, there's also like double work to be done, right? And then in addition, it's all secretive, so it makes it even worse, because you cannot say, oh, I have a meeting at 4 and it's a new job interview or something. So you have like, in addition, additional stress for all this meantime, which brings me to my next topic. So you've talked already a little bit about burnout, and I think it's so funny, when in the beginning of a new topic, or like in the beginning of actually society agreeing that it's okay to talk about the topic, like burnout, it wasn't talked before at all about. And then, yes, it got more common, I think, because everything gets more dynamic and just the pressure, the mental load is getting more, I feel, in society overall. So it comes up more and more. In the beginning, it was like a topic everybody wanted to talk about and wanted to learn more about. But talking about burnout from the other side, right? The other side of burnout, like how do I make sure that I don't run into burnout, is on the one hand side, I think the personal development to be able to set the boundaries. And on the other hand, also working on your resilience level, right? And I think as a coach, just like as a doctor, ideally, we're walking our own talk, right? So my question to you would be, what are you doing in your everyday life to make sure that you're resilient? You're listening to many stories and they're not always happy endings to them either, right? And people come, they're devastated. So what do you do to stay mentally sane, to be able to be strong and to have the strength also to hold the room for the other people, right? I think this is a big part of being a coach, and you only understand what it means once you are in the situation, right? You need to hold this room. So what are things that you do regularly that you could share?
Yeah, well, and again, I'll tell you the choices that I've made for me, which may not be the choices that everyone else makes, but for me, it does start in healthy relationships, not only with family and friends and making sure that they're scheduled into my calendar, but also in the community. I volunteer in the community, and I also have professional relationships. So I'm part of a mastermind where, we're together in person a few times a year and then together online multiple times. And knowing that there are safe groups for me of where I don't have to be anything other than however I'm showing up that day. I don't have to be, perfect. I don't have to have the answers. I just have to be. And so to me, resilience does start with having the relationships, and, relationships don't pop out of thin air. I mean, it is maintenance and work, but it's prioritization. It's knowing that is as much for me as it is for the other people. For me too, I actively make a choice about what inputs come in. So again, this doesn't work for everybody, but I don't have a TV in my house.
Wow.
I am very stingy about what inputs come into, this brain, this heart, this body. It doesn't mean that, I mean, I read newspapers, I'm online, I'm on social for my business. I feel 99% clued in most of the time, and the 1% of things that I miss, if someone mentions them at a party or what have you, I'll say, oh, well, tell me more, and no one seems to care. But it has helped me from going unconscious of the stream of uh, just the media noise and all of the things. And again, there's lots of good things in our media, but I've made a personal choice for me, knowing how my brain works, that the overload of just that information flow and increasingly some of the emotional flow of
Yes.
what's on our screens, that is not for me. I also do have social media timers on
Hmm.
my smartphone. So now sometimes I'll override them, but just to, again, use the tools that exist to raise my consciousness about the commitment of watching what comes in, because it's so easy to be watching some cooking reel and it's like, what are they going to do with that fried egg now? And you're all of a sudden, it's like it's a half an hour later and I've done nothing productive. Again, that's
Yes.
a tame example, but we all know that there's so much input out there. I think you have to recognize that uh, you're going to miss out, that FOMO is, yeah, it's like, absolutely, will I miss out? Sure, great. And that's okay. And what I miss out on isn't going to significantly change the course of my life in any way. And
Yeah.
so, and that is, I think once I made that discovery across my career, there is just a freedom of letting yourself just experience what happens, same way then being able to be an empathetic, deep listener, professional coach, and I can hear and absorb what's going on, but still keep it in its place where the client owns it, and I don't own it. So those are some things that I personally do for resilience, and it's an everyday battle, right? Saying no to things that aren't aligned with what are my superpowers, the things
Yes.
that I do at my best and highest use. We all have to work on it every day.
That makes a lot of sense. I just to sum it up, so making sure you have those personal relationships, either family or also in a business environment, have those confidential rooms where you could just show up as yourself and just talk about what's going on if you are struggling at the moment, and having those open ears, right, from people that you trust, and then making sure that the input is really what you want to let in and not just random what the algorithm basically decided you should watch next, you should do next. So yeah, I love that. And last but not least, your point on FOMO is so important, because I think a lot of business models are set up based on FOMO. So it's very important to be aware of that. And what I felt, to add my 2 cents to it, what I felt is that once I started to also be more connected with myself, and that people can do that in whatever way. For me, meditation works really well, guided meditations, those kinds of things. Once I got more connected with myself again, being more able to look on the inside, not only on the outside, both, right, in a good relationship to each other, um, I had started to develop a better gut feeling. So I didn't have to have all the facts, because you're never done getting all the facts about every single decision that you're about to make. Like, it starts in the morning, setting up your wardrobe for going to the office, like that's where it starts, literally, right? So, or in your morning routine or whatever it is, you will never be done getting all the facts. You will miss out on something, and it's not a problem. And the way I treated myself, let's say, because I was one of those people that was constantly adding more and more, right? It's where I come from, so to speak. And once I started to develop this gut feeling, it got way easier for me to make those decisions and just to be fine with the decision that I made. I've seen one reel recently. Sometimes they're great too, where the person was saying, just make a decision and make the decision right, instead of constantly trying to make the right decision, because your decisions will be flawed either way. So it's just important, in my opinion, stay connected to yourself, ask yourself, is this really for me? and only you can know that. And once you start to feel the liberty and the freedom again, you don't want to go back. Really, I think nobody wants to go back to being directed by the outside pressures all of the time, right?
The art of having career clarity, having personal clarity, so that you can make decisions that are right for you. And none of us knows what the result of our decision is going to make. The root of the word decision in Latin comes from a word that's to cut. And so where we go wrong is we don't actually cut this. We kind of decide, and then we're like, well, maybe not. Well, maybe, but if this happens, then it happens. It's
yes.
Okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to stay here till the end of the year, and then I'm going to make a decision as to what I do next. Or I'm going to let myself off the hook from worrying about, should I take a kayaking class, or I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to park it. But that's a decision, so that it frees up your brain. Yes. And as long as we feel good about our decisions, it doesn't really matter what the decision is. But I do think that is something to help manage anxiety, manage stress, is making more decisions, as opposed to keeping a lot of, what the writers would call open loops. Too many yes. open loops, too many things unresolved, causes stress and anxiety.
Yes. Oh, I fully agree. Well, thank you for adding that. We're already getting to the end of the podcast. So where can people find you? What is your, favorite channels?
Sure. Well, all of the things in my world center around redcaperevolution.com. So that's my website, where my blog is, where we have a whole page of free tools and downloadable things. You can also find the classes that I have, and a link to my latest book, which is called Red Cape Rescue: Save Your Career Without Leaving Your Job, which of course is also on Amazon and all other online booksellers. So that's the best way. Secondary for social is LinkedIn, where I'm just Darcy Eikenberg. And if you're connecting with me on LinkedIn, please do send a personalized note. Tell me that you met me here through Bela, and I would love to connect with any of your listeners.
Great. Thank you so much, Darcy, for your time. Thank you for sharing all of your insights. I think it was a great episode. I would have loved to have this kind of resources, like 15 years ago. So I really hope that we can help people out there to get on the right track as quickly as possible, so they don't have to have those catalyst moments to begin with. So thank you so much for sharing. And yeah,
thank you so much for what you do. You're right. If we have more resources and talking more openly about these things, all we can do is help each other be better. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Darcy.